Ninja Gaiden 4 is finally here. 2025 is the year of the ninja, and one of the main selling points of Ninja Gaiden 4 is the fact that we have two playable characters in Ninja Gaiden 4. And while this is not really new to the Ninja Gaiden series, we had playable characters in the series before other than Ryu Hayabusa. It was always in the enhanced version or like the Sigma editions. They were never canon to the story to be playable, and I'm gonna be honest, they were always kinda derivative of Ryu Hayabusa anyways. This is the first time where we legit have two completely different characters with different playstyles that are playable in the game. And yes, I know that Ryu's part isn't that big, but you can replay through the whole game as Ryu, and I'm sure with the DLC he's gonna improve as well. So today we're doing what any sensible person will do. We're gonna pit them against each other. Ryu, Yakumo, who is actually stronger out of these two? And just two main disclaimers here. We're not comparing this from a canon point of view, because obviously Ryu will absolutely clear Yakumo and everyone else. I mean, Ryu is insane in the canon. When I finally got to play as Ryu and you saw him running on the water instead of using the surfboard, I was like, Yakumo is so screwed. And another huge thing to avoid spoilers is that I'm not gonna talk about Yakumo in his complete final form, that one final weapon that he unlocks, because at that point, I mean, what's the point of the comparison? I'm pretty much gonna talk about base Yakumo versus base Ryu in Ninja Gaiden 4 and which one is the strongest. Now, let's be honest, the game does a fantastic job of making you feel more powerful with Ryu, and on face value, Ryu does feel more powerful than Yakumo. I think when you really think about it, Yakumo puts up a much better fight than you would think of initially. Now, when we compare them, we first start with the boss fights and just how much damage each of them is doing, and I think it is clear that Ryu just does more damage. Ryu's Hayabusa is a tank and an insane brawler in this game, and especially apparent in 1v1 encounters. It feels like Ryu just simply does more damage. Everything you do with Ryu feels like it does a little bit more damage than whether you're doing it with Yakumo. But I think if we looked at it from a damage perspective, that is not really giving us the complete picture. The main appeal of Yakumo in this game is that he have a lot more tools and he have a lot more weapons at his disposal. Unfortunately, in this game, as we know, Ryu only have access to the Dragon Sword, where Yakumo have 4 different weapons in the base form. We have the dual katanas, which is like a jack of all trade. He does have the rapier, give him a little bit of range. He does have the staff, kind of like the lunar, the ones that have good area of effect, and he does have his final weapon. I like to call it like the Pandora's box, because this is crazy. For like a Ninja Gaiden weapon, his 4th weapon is actually crazy, and it does give Yakumo an edge that you may not think of initially, which is powerful ranged attacks. In this game, Ryu no longer have access to his bow and arrow. So when you're fighting a ranged unit, and Lord knows there's so many of them, especially ones that are flying, I feel like it's not that easy for Ryu to deal with them. He gotta rely on shurikens, but if it's an armored one, it may take a lot of hits for it to fall down, or you have to jump up there somehow, and hitting flying swallow on them is not always that easy. Where Yakumo, Blood Raven, bam, and you insta knock them down, and just like hitting them is really easy with Yakumo. I find that Yakumo movement and his approaches against aerial opponents are simply much more superior to Ryu. But then again, Ryu still have one trump card that we haven't talked about, which is his Ninbu. Ryu can use his ki to use the Ninbu attack, and Ninbus will deal massive damage to these aerial units. So if you do have the meter, you may use the Ninbu on Void or the Fire Ninbu and get like insta KOs on them. So I don't think Ryu is hopeless against these guys, but I do think it's much easier to deal with the ranged units as Yakumo. What do you guys think? They're convinced? I hope so. If you like the video but you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Over 70% of my viewers aren't, so you get to see more of me and my friends, the EX-Men. And yes, like in my canon, Magneto is I recruited him. Excuse the silliness and enjoy the rest of your video. Another thing that is very noticeable in this game is that the camera is pulled back and the arenas are much wider. And I think they thought about this, and you can see its implementation in Yakumo's moveset as well, because Yakumo have so many moves that will hit a large area, especially the Blood Raven form weapons, especially the sword. It can have a ton of massive sweeping attacks that can hit a large number of enemies, and even then he does have the Lunar, which can hit multiple enemies easily. Unfortunately, this is another area where, because Ryu only have access to the Dragon Sword, he's not able to hit as many number of enemies or hit like huge area as well as Yakumo can do. But this is only in like the very basic point of view. When you really take a look at Ryu, what he got is ridiculous, because once again Ryu have Nimbo. And the wind Ninbo for Ryu, yes, it does consume a lot of his ki gauge, but the wind Ninbo for Ryu does massive damage, massive area of effect to his surroundings, and most likely it will de-limb enemies that are closer to Ryu, allowing him to get a lot of obliteration techniques and rebuild that Gleam or ki gauge. Another thing with Ryu is that a lot of his Gleam moves also hit a surprisingly large area. So although Ryu only has the Dragon Sword, he's still able to hit a large area because of the Gleam moves. And I would say his Mirage, which is like his perfect block if you're in Gleam mode, that deals massive area of effect and massive de-limb rates as well. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but Ryu's Gleam teleport attacks are the same ones that he had in the original Ninja Gaiden 1. It is the True Dragon Sword ultimate technique. That's just like irregular moves that Ryu does these days. Goes to show you like how far Ryu have come along. Ryu is truly a beast in this game. Another area where I think Ryu have a substantial advantage over Yakumo in is simply the Blood Raven or the Gleam moves. Ryu's Blood Raven or Gleam attacks, they come out a lot faster than Yakumo, right? So if you're trying to interrupt an enemy during an unblockable attacks, it feels much easier to do this with Ryu than it is with Yakumo, because his Gleam Light comes out insta fast. But it's not only that he interrupts faster, Ryu have an unblockable launcher, which is his Gleam Strong, his Gleam Triangle. That is an unblockable launcher. That is actually insane when you really think about it in the context of this game. Now, Yakumo do have some special moves that he can use as unblockable launchers, but typically they are a lot slower. I think in general, Yakumo's Blood Raven attacks, they trade a lot of that speed for power, but Ryu's base kit still does a ton of damage anyway, so he has the power and the speed. I actually think it's Yakumo's Pandora's box that has the fastest Blood Raven move, the light version, the ranged weapon, but otherwise it still feels like Ryu's Gleam come out faster and is much more practical in many of these encounters. And speaking of practical, one thing that I always kind of struggled with Yakumo is that when you activate his Berserk state, it's not that easy to get the insta kills. With Ryu's Berserk or with his Super Gleam True Dragon Sword mode, all of the regular Gleam moves are just gonna be insta-kill, right? So just strong, just light attack, that is insta-kill. Where with Yakumo, the base moves will not trigger the insta-kill. You have to charge the sword, you have to charge the drill, you have to perfectly time the hammer. It feels like there is a lot more skill needed to actually get that insta-kill. And sure, he does have some special moves like the hammer lunges that will trigger the insta-kill immediately, but it feels much harder to get to that point compared to Ryu that will get there much easier. At the end of the day, I do think that Yakumo is actually very strong, but in a surprising twist, I feel like Yakumo is also much harder to use than Ryu. Where in many of these character action games where like we have Dante and then they introduce Nero will be the easy character compared to Dante. Here it's kind of the opposite. I feel like Ryu is super strong and he's much easier to play than Yakumo, where Yakumo have a lot more depth. I think you have to switch up your weapons, everyone for like a different situation, and even then like using the Blood Raven hammer where you have to perfectly time your attacks or knowing when to pick up the drill. Yakumo is capable of doing a lot of damage, like his drill can do a ton of damage, and in general his Blood Raven attacks can do a ton of damage, but there is like a skill level that you have to unlock to be able to do that with Yakumo, which I find to be very interesting. I think the entire point of this game was for us to view Hayabusa from a different point of view so we can appreciate him a lot more. But I think Yakumo was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed his gameplay. I didn't enjoy the final weapon, which I'm not gonna go over because obviously that's spoiler. I really dislike that they did that, by the way. But Yakumo's 4 weapons are amazing. They're a ton of fun. Ryu is just a beast and his nimbus are so strong. I know we're always conditioned as Ninja Gaiden fans to not use Nimbu. It would even like deduct from your score in the previous games, but Ninbu is also like insanely powerful in this game. So what are your thoughts? Do you think Yakumo is stronger? Do you think Ryu is stronger? Would you like to see Ayane in this game? Did you see her design? She looks sick. I would love to see Ayane. I would love to see Rachel. There are fiends. I would love to see Kasumi maybe, and maybe Hayate someday. Who knows? If you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment. It helps the channel so much. I will be leaving a link to the Patreon, Discord, Twitter, and Twitch pages in the description. Thank you so much for watching and stay safe.